Welcome to the 100X Life Podcast, where we activate people who desire to live the words of Jesus and experience the abundant life he promises. I'm your host, Rob Dayton, and I hope this podcast inspires you to put in the work of following Jesus.
Now the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captives free.
Hey, 100X Lifers, welcome to day 21, Word of Jesus, number 15, Become Like a Child. I just wanted to, we've got this great interview with Ron Midyett, and I think you're going to really enjoy it. I certainly did. And I just wanted to take a moment to say how significant the conversation was for me in terms of thinking about one of the things Ron brings up is that becoming like a child is impacting a lot of the words of Jesus. Like if you go through a lot of the words and you look at a child's ability to do most of the words of Jesus, it's pretty easy. Versus now we've gone through this pain and hurt. We've become jaded. We're suspicious. And all those things are working against us now. And Jesus is inviting us to go back to our childlike spirit where we unlearn some of the things that we've learned and actually start practicing this attitude he's calling us into. It's really quite brilliant to think about. And this is the thing that really got me to think about that as children, we are born into this world to follow Jesus better than we are once we've been in it for a while. That's pretty crazy. And when you think about it, our biggest slavery aspect of that, whether it's slavery to sin or slavery to righteousness, is the unconscious brain, which through childhood gets programmed into programs we now are trying to undo through 100X Life. Isn't it crazy how as an attitude as a child, we are already free in truth. And so let this be a really great day for you to celebrate how to become like a child, how to become free, to think about all the words of Jesus and the things you're being obedient to as walking into freedom. Think about that. It's going to be wonderful, and enjoy the conversation with Ron Midyett. Hey, we're here with Ron Midyett, a really close friend of mine, super close. We've gotten so close to Nancy and I both, to Ron and Kathy, his beautiful wife. Ron has been in the Master's program. He's a graduate of that and has done 100X Life Challenge a couple times. We want to hear from him about that. But Ron, tell us about yourself. What do listeners need to know about you as we navigate this Word of Jesus 15, Become Like a Child? What do they need to know about you?
Well, I guess first and foremost, of all the people that Rob Dayton know, I got honored by selected to talk with you about becoming a child. So, hey, thanks.
Let's go. Yeah. So, and what's interesting about that is, and ironic is, okay, here's the CEO, of a big corporation, serious. And of course I know your story, but tell us about, like who you are and what you've done.
Yeah. I mean, a little bit of background. You already mentioned Kathy, my beautiful wife, 34 years. We have two amazing kids, Andrew, 29, Lauren, 26. Total joy of my life right now, just kind of watching them navigate adulting and just doing well. It's super fun. Yeah, 35 years in the produce industry, running operations, running companies. I'm kind of on the cusp. I tried it once, trying to, step away, do a little bit, what's next. I got sucked back in. There's a joke in the produce industry that, if you do it for a couple of years and you find it that you like it, it's kind of like, we call it produce crack. It keeps it's very addictive, and it keeps pulling people back in. So yeah, I'm back in doing a gig, and that's kind of winding down right now. And yeah, both Kathy and I are excited about kind of what's next.
That is so cool. And you actually stepped out of your CEO role the first time, and then that was your entrance into the master's program, kind of
Correct.
The perfect timing to think about, okay, what does the third and fourth quarter look like? And then you say you got sucked back in. that was kind of an interesting thing because we were talking about that. I'm like, Ron, be careful. And then what's cool about it and related to today, and I want to get into this, related to why I think you're perfect for this word, is you wanted to test your ability to be in joy as a CEO. So that sets the stage, but let's get the backstory because I think this is brilliant. So you are in the master's program and we get to the session 9 and I'm like, we're talking about your new name. What does the Father call you? And tell us about that experience.
Yeah. Again, I was praying a lot about it and, listening for what the Father had said. And what I got was really to kind of, well, what does Ron mean? And I'm like, all these years I've carried this name. I don't know what it meant. And looked it up and there was one meaning of it is, powerful leader. But then the other one is song of joy. And
Wow.
and to me, that resonated. It's true. It's who I am. I've always, been seeking joy in life. It's so important to me. Joy, enjoyment, fun, lightheartedness. And yeah, so what's cool is, I consider my name Joy, or is Joy. Kathy's done the same exercise. Kathy means pure. So together, as husband and wife,
Pure joy.
Pure joy. It's really awesome.
That is awesome. So tell us about that journey, because that was a pretty cool discovery, pretty impactful for you, as I remember. And then, Dole asked you to come back in to part-time CEO, and your decision to do that had a lot to do with exercising joy in seeing if you could do that in the CEO position. Tell us about why that wasn't true before and what changed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I said earlier that joy has always been critical to me, even in the work. I've always had 4 primary criteria at work of things that to keep me going. Is one, I always felt like I wanted to learn new things. Didn't want to be static. Felt like I wanted to contribute to the organization, and then naturally, human nature, you want to feel like you're acknowledged, not necessarily rewarded, but at least acknowledged for those contributions. And lastly is I had to have fun, enjoyment, right? And if any of those 4 things were not happening for me, either you work on trying and change them, or you can put up with it, which never was something I would do, or you look for a new opportunity. And what's interesting over the course of my career, all the times that I've made changes were always because of that 4th item, is there was no joy left in the thing. It was never about anything else. It was always about joy. So yeah, you mentioned the TMP experience. I walked away from. I had that. You hear about it all the time. I had that experience where you walk into the corner office and you look around. You're running this organization. You have the big C title, and I looked around and I said, "Really? Is this it? And
wow,
is what life all about?" And at the time, both my kids were kind of launching out of college, or launching out of the house, I should say. 2 parents that were ill, and I just felt like there was other things that needed my time rather than work. And so I stepped away really to focus on those things. And it was really at that time that I was introduced to TMP and to you. And, the first day I walked into TMP, sat around a group of guys, and they started talking, and everybody was articulating things that were working around in my brain. And I thought I was the only person in the world that had these thoughts, concerns.
Right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, this is where I need to be. What was really cool about that is I came into TMP at a time where I was looking for that next stage. What's next in the second half? And a lot of the discussion in TMP is building that foundation, building your margin, if you will, to be able to allow you to do those things. Well, heck, I had taken care of that by simply kind of walking away. And so it was really a good time in my life.
That was perfect. And then what was your discussion with yourself when you were asked to go back in and fill the seat again, albeit temporary?
Yeah.
I think you told me 6 months.
Yeah. In a senior role like that, there's a lot of responsibilities. There's a lot of pressures.
What's your number one strength again?
It's responsibility.
Yes.
It's a blessing and a curse. And so I have to say in my last role, I let a lot of those, kind of pressures, get to me. Things became all consuming at the expense of, quite honestly, I think my marriage, I think my kids, relationships. As I mentioned, the joy was kind of gone at the end. And so, I was able, that time away, I was able to reset, focus on priorities. And then when I had this opportunity to step back in, albeit it was only supposed to be for 6 months, it's been 2.5 years now. I really did a pro and con list. And the key thing in there is, could I step back in to that role and not to revert back to where I was? Could I still find joy in the moment? Could I still have the right priorities and stuff? And, knock on wood, at this point, I've still been able to do that. And it's been a good journey.
Wow. That's so incredible. Thank you for sharing that. And I just have to say that when you told me 6 months, I think I laughed out loud. It's because you are such a leadership commodity. And of course, the situation that the company's in is challenging, and you've turned it around. It's amazing, just like you. Let's get into this. Let's get into this scripture, because this one, I think this is probably one of my favorite ones, and I'm so excited to do it with you, because I totally think that, Papa God calling you joy, and then having you talk about become like a child, is so perfect. And I think that for people who are listening or reading, this one also might be a little bit more challenging to think about, how do we practically live this one. Remember, following Jesus is actually living his words, and this is one of the things he says to do. It's very important when we read the scripture. How do we do it? So let's get into it. I'm actually going to read a little bit more that's in the book, because it sets the context for Jesus's instruction to become like a child. This is in Matthew 18:1. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom?" So they're thinking about who's the best, who rises to the top. And then Jesus uses a child as the example of the top. He says, he called the little child to him. So it's a show and tell. I've got a little child on my lap, and he placed the child among them. And he said, "Truly, I tell you, unless you change." So newsflash, disciples, you're not there yet. Unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Oh my gosh, that is a strong statement, Jesus. And then he says, "Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." And then just a kind of a bonus, "And whoever welcomes one such child in my name actually welcomes me." So it's
a mind blow.
It's a mind blower. What are your reactions, Ron, just as you see the context? What goes off in your mind when you think about that?
Yeah, to me, it's a little bit, I kind of laugh at adulthood, right? Because, we're born, and then we learn, and we become educated, and we become smart and worldly and stuff. And according to Jesus, in a lot of ways, we kind of lose things when we're doing that. We regress, and we have to go back to being like a child.
Yeah, we do. And let's talk about what going back might look like. And one of the things I struggle with, maybe the best way to put it is believing or understanding, is Paul's description of love. It's one of my, 1 Corinthians 13, this incredible description of what love looks like. And just to put it with the words of Jesus, it's my opinion that if we live like Jesus lived, that is living love. And so Paul gives this description, and in it he says, one of the phrases is, "Love believes all things." And I've always struggled with that. I'm like, well, you want me to believe everything, even when I'm being duped? You want to believe all things? And what's really interesting, and I've connected this, with journaling with Holy Spirit, is that that's what kids do. Yeah. I mean, we can tell them about this fat man in a red suit who goes down a chimney with gifts. every Christmas, and they're like, I'm in. I believe that. What does that connect it with you? Like,
well, absolutely. And it's natural for kids, right? We're talking through this process. We're talking about trying to build with the words of Jesus to make them just natural muscle memory, if you will, right? To use your gym analogy. That's what kids are. That's what they do. I mean, I went through the index of your book and the words of Jesus as we were talking about doing this. And I'd invite all the listeners to do the same. And go down that list and just tell yourself which of these words of Jesus or these actions that Jesus asked you to do come perfectly natural to a child. You know, believe, follow, forgive, do not judge, do not condemn, reconciliation, giving, letting light shine. All of these things, kids aren't thinking about those things. They're just being and they just emanate out of them. And I think that's what Jesus is really talking about. Be natural in these things I want you to do.
That I think that is so powerful. And I hadn't even thought about doing that, but that is so right on. It's almost like the automatic behavior we're trying to get in the gym and get.
Yeah.
We already had once before.
That's right.
Automatically as a child.
Yeah.
So are you connecting that with when Jesus is saying become like a child? That's actually a good way of painting the picture of what that might look like.
Yeah. Yeah. We have it in us. We expressed it once, and then we allowed ourselves to be changed, contaminated, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, we think that being an adult and being mature and being worldly, is more important than just our natural tendencies.
And let's talk about that, because I think that's fascinating. I truly have never thought about this before, what you just framed. I think it is so important that this thought that we used to be that at one time in our existence. We used to do this naturally, and then it was undone. And in the words of Yoda, you must unlearn what you have learned. We've got to unlearn what we've learned. What happened to us? What is the thing that, and in Jesus's terms, the thing that has actually duped us into less naturally living the words of Jesus? What was that thing that happened to us? Can we give them examples of that?
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna speak to myself. I think for me, and my story. I think a lot of my challenge was a trust issue, right? And some things in my past that created this trust, and so therefore I have to do things myself. I don't need others. Look at a child, they're a community being, right? They're looking to play with others and stuff. And I kind of was isolating myself. I think in this, we're just fed a lot in terms of the world about what it means to be successful and happy. And it's not God-centric. It's world-centric and possession-centric and things-centric. And I think that takes over. This day, with the social media and stuff, you're creating the bubbles and whatnot, and you're in this camp and that camp. And I think that creates the idea of reconciliation and condemnation and those things. Just makes it so easy to participate in those things. Mm-hmm. I think for me personally, I try not to take things too seriously.
Right.
I think people caught up so much and everything is a crisis, or everything is a crisis du jour, if you will. But
that's really important, because you just pivoted from, there's these things that have created us to be more jaded, less believing, more suspicious, maybe more inclined to not be forgiving, to judge, to condemn. And then you said, what I'm trying to do to combat all that, particularly when you're looking at other people, is like, okay, it's not that serious. Yes, there are these things in life that have captivated us, that's not necessarily what's important. It's interesting to me that, like, back to Santa Claus, like, I'm just thinking about this, and I don't know I can't remember if this was my experience, but I can just imagine a kid, the conversation. So this Santa Claus thing wasn't true? Like what else?
Yeah.
What else am I being told that is not true? So when Paul says love is believe all things, one of the things that got hijacked for us as children is people actually told us things that weren't true. We found out about it, and then we became less likely to believe all things. Does that sound right? Like, do you remember like thinking to yourself about the Santa Claus thing? Like, how did I get duped?
I don't know specifically, thinking about that. I go somewhere else where I help contribute to, popping that bubble with my sisters. But that was not really cool.
So you were the one who told them, "Hey,
Yeah.
I got news for you. Mom and Dad are pulling a fast one on you."
Yeah.
Gosh, I think that was the same with Jed. I think Kendra did that too. And then the other thing is that we're getting hurt. So, children are so innocent, and they don't suspect. They believe the best. It's really fascinating to even think about it now. I'm just like, wow, that is so freeing.
Yeah.
It's such freedom.
Right. And even when a child is wrong, right, by one of their playmates or whatnot, how quickly does forgiveness happen? How quickly do they forget and they're back in the action of the game or, interactions? We can learn from that.
We can learn from that. And then I think also, and you made this connection to how we respond to others, is that just understanding that everyone has been through the ringer and gone through this process of believing all things and now does not. And I think if we're calling people back to a childlike position, we have to kind of believe in them that that's possible. I do this on my executive retreats, executive coaching retreats. One of the exercises we do is share this thing called personal histories. And the whole intent is to build trust. And you kind of hit on the trust thing for you. And so here's what we ask everyone to share. So where did you fall in the lineup of your kids, of your brothers and sisters? Where'd you fall in? In other words, were you first, middle, last? And then where did you grow up in as a family? In what environment? How would you describe that? And then what was a big challenge you had growing up? And I always go first, and I tell them, a pretty vulnerable story about my dad. He actually, I had three sisters, and the youngest sister was 14 years older than me when I was born. So I was like the latecomer. And my dad believed that children were to be seen and not heard. And he made a fold-up table in the laundry room. And that's where I had dinner until I was able to behave enough to be at the dinner table. And that was, let me tell you, a long time. And so like, I didn't even realize like how challenging that was, because I didn't feel like I was worthy. I came away with I think what happened to me is I felt like I wasn't worthy to be at that table. So anyway, so I go first like that. And then people are all sharing their stories. And here's what we find out is that everyone had a challenge as a child. Sure. Everyone, and the room is, people are crying and, they're teary and they're struggling seeing it. And the reason it builds trust is now the light bulb is on. Oh my gosh, everyone else, I'm in the same boat with everybody else. And then that opens a passageway for us to believe once again, in other people. What's your reflections on that process of, if we believe in people more, we have to understand they've been through this process where they used to believe like a child, now they're not. And how do we get them back to that place?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it. I mean, everybody has the same experience as you do, different but same, right? It was my experience walking into the room at TMP, right? And if you're seeing somebody out in public, you don't know their story, right? And so you need to take it from, really from that position,
right? That's good. I want to read from another from another version of Jesus. So Luke has another situation. This is Luke 18:17. Jesus says, "Truly I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Wow.
I know.
Yeah. So to me, then it's really, my mind goes to, me, I'm, the arranger and achiever. And so how, what does that look like? How do you do that? And so to me, again, it's going back to saying, what are the natural tendencies of a child? And, what do I have to emulate? And again, I come back with things like trust and wonder and imagination and curiosity and being open myself to be dependent on others, to be around others, to, I think so.
That's difficult sometimes. That's difficult.
Oh yeah. I mentioned, don't overthink things. Don't take things so seriously. Be filled with joy. Yeah.
How do you express that? What would you say is kind of the Ron groove of here's how I express joy, and it actually has a flair of childlikeness? How does the CEO of a big company do that?
Oh gosh, outside of being probably too silly.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's part of it, is just being silly.
Yeah. I'm going to continue to come back to, I just don't take things too serious. And I know that sounds weird coming from a CEO. What I do, I take it very responsible. I'm responsible for a large organization, thousands of people and their livelihoods. But at the end of the day, again, I work for a produce company. At the end of the day, I say I put lettuce in a bag, right? And so you can do your job, you can go about life and be responsible without really taking things that seriously. Don't think too highly of yourself. Be humble in what you do. Look for the fun in things. I think it's a choice, right?
That's good. It's a choice. Like everything you're talking about is completely a choice you're going to make in the situation.
That's right. I choose joy.
It's so funny. I had a phrase I was playing around with back. I don't know if I've told you about this back. It must be 15 years ago, but I had this thought and I was thinking about do not worry and how we kind of submit to worry. Things start ruminating in our brains, and all of a sudden we've just submitted to worry, and we even worry about what's the next shoe to drop type of thing. And I came up with this phrase: why don't you just submit to joy? Like,
there you go.
And have the thought, any moment now, I'm probably going to break out in laughter.
Oh, I know.
Any moment, life is going to get so unbelievably good. Your suspicion is that it's going to get better.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So cool.
There's so much in life. There's so much in life to make light of, to laugh at, to find joy in the small things. You just got to choose to do it.
So it's a choice. Let me ask you about this. Jesus is saying, to enter the kingdom of God, you've got to become like a child. I kind of think maybe a lot of people think the kingdom in that, as Jesus is talking about, is heaven. And I think and I want to get your opinion on this. I don't think that's actually right, because the kingdom is a governance. And Jesus said the kingdom is at hand, and many people are forcing their way into it. So we know the kingdom, that Jesus is ruling and he's governing, and we know the kingdom is expanding and doesn't retreat. It's expanding. So in the context of the kingdom is now, and that has opportunity for now, why do you think that not receiving this, what we're talking about, this kingdom as a child, would prevent you from entering it, let's say now? It's a heady thought.
Yeah, it is a heavy thought. And, as you were going through that, I was kind of thinking, it doesn't matter if we're talking about the kingdom now or the kingdom.
Either way,
why not get on it, right?
Yeah, don't wait. And so what do you think the attributes of not being like a child would prevent us from experiencing the kingdom now?
Well, I mean, again, it's Jesus' design. If he is, and Jesus is full abundance, right? Jesus is perfect. If he's giving us the roadmap to get there, right? Why wait?
Why wait? And then and I'm just trying to think of practical ways. I'm trying to back end it. Like, okay, we were talking about how to be like a child so you would enter, but what would be the prevention? The first thing comes to my mind is just doubts about impossibility, because the kingdom is a governance of impossibilities becoming possible.
Sure.
Deliverance, healing, salvation, transformation. If you doubt it's possible, that connects it back to Paul's believe all things. If you just doubt that something is even possible, maybe what Jesus is saying is that's preventing us from entering into that kingdom structure.
Sure. I mean, what was the first word we went through in this process, right? It's believe.
That's the tip of the spear in the kingdom, is you've got to believe in it.
Yeah.
And in a kingdom where there's talky donkeys, and people having open visions and being teleported. I'm thinking of Philip being teleported.
It's wilder than a heavy set guy in a red suit, huh?
It's a little wilder than Santa Claus. I mean, is that it? I mean, it's crazy to think. It's crazy for me to think of the people who don't believe in miracles.
Yeah.
Because the Bible they're reading is so laced with the insanely crazy miracles. Why wouldn't that be today? I have this kind of funny thing about, I always kind of laugh and snicker to myself. I've thought about this so much when people say, so you're praying for someone who's sick, and maybe they're going to get a surgery, and people pray, guide the doctor's hands. And I'm thinking to myself, if God can guide the doctor's hands, I'm pretty sure he could just take the sickness right out right now. What level do you want, really? And it shows a limitation, my opinion, and I want to be sensitive to people. Everyone's at a different place in their faith. But in my opinion, that's almost like it's not believing in the full possibilities of the kingdom.
Sure. And here we go again. We're back to child's imagination and sense of wonder is unlimited. And as we get older, we allow ourselves to rationalize that belief away.
That is so cool. I'm thinking of all these things about how a child operates. And here's another one. So for a child, hope is an expectation. And I think that's really what Jesus is calling us, is like, hope is not a maybe, hope is an expectation. And I'm thinking of a story I heard where describing hope, where here's what hope is. It's on Christmas morning at the top of the stairs, waiting for their parents to let them go down. And their hope is in the presents, which they absolutely know are going to be there. And so what's the feeling of a child in that moment? It's like anticipation, imagination, just the things you're saying.
Yeah. Joy.
Let's go back to this other thing, because I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about, why is Jesus saying this in response to the disciples' question about who will be the greatest? So they're saying, who then is the greatest in the kingdom? Jesus is saying, if you become like a child, then, he actually doesn't say, then you'll be the greatest. He says, if you don't, you will never enter it. Why do you think he's talking about the childlike spirit as being actually significant? Let's use that word, in the kingdom.
You don't know for sure, right? But I can imagine just kind of how an adult mind thinks. They're thinking of all these, criteria perhaps that, that
Yes.
that they would say is, oh, I've done this, so therefore I deserve that, right? And maybe Jesus is just resetting the scale here and saying that's not what I'm measuring against. Really, what I'm measuring against is these like pure criteria, perhaps.
Hmm.
And I got to believe that was also for those whoever those that were asking the question, pretty humbling, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Because there's up there, oh, look at me, I should be one of those, and nah, not quite, but it's you're looking on the wrong scale.
And yeah, and another that I think you might be even referring to, like the conversation where they're arguing over who's the greatest. And what I think is crazy about Jesus is he doesn't say bad argument, bad desire. He says, no, here's how you do it. Become the servant of all. And I think that fits into the lane here. We could actually think of these juxtaposition wise is you're a child. Child is your attitude toward the kingdom, and servant is your position of giving.
Sure.
In the kingdom. That's pretty powerful. I think we're doing good. I think that this one, now that I'm talking to you and thinking this through with you, I think actually this one might be one of the easier things to do, particularly because of your point about if you go into the index and you just read all the instructions and how many of those a kid has that down.
Yeah.
I think we can be more practical if we just think in any given situation, how would a child believe in this situation?
Sure. You think about it. A lot of things we're in this process we're going to be going to be adding behaviors, right? This is one it's subtractive.
I got to go back.
We got to go back. We got to get rid of habits that we have, not create new ones.
Wow. I think that's so helpful for me. I hope that's helpful for those who are listening. Super powerful. And that totally is a next life gym experience to bring back the mindset. But it's cool because we've already been there. And I think we've got great evidence. All of us know kids, all of us are experiencing kids and see their behaviors. And then I think it's easier than some of the other words to think about how does that behavior help me participate in the kingdom and Jesus' governance better. Okay, cool. Let me run these 100X lifestyle bullet points by you. I want to get your reaction to them. So what we're trying to do again is just make it really clear what Jesus is talking about in terms of a lifestyle. So here's the first one. You understand childlike thinking, believing in and practice opening your mind to the kingdom impossible. So you understand childlike thinking, believing, and practice opening your mind to the kingdom of the impossible.
Come on.
Absolutely. Come on. Anything else on that?
You just got to get there, right? You
feel like you're there? Do you feel like you're there in a lot of situations? My experience of you is yes, but what is your thought on you?
Yeah, I think I am.
Come on, let's go.
I do. I mean, again, am I perfect at this? No. But do I try and look at things simplistically? Do I try and look at things not complicated? Do I try not to overthink things? Absolutely. Do I allow myself to try and focus more on the good on things than on the bad on things? Yes.
That, and so you might be more in the lane of reproducing this particular word. And how do you think that so in Jesus' analogy, when we reproduce, in the parable of the sower, fruit, and in the fruit is more seed, which would be more of his word transferred to other people. How do you think you have you been aware of this childlike spirit of joy, not taking things seriously? How is it changing people or impacting their lives so that they could actually do this too?
I do see it in the work world a lot. People that are introduced to me new will kind of, look at me and say, hey, this is kind of different. This is a different approach. I think it's more relaxing for them. I think it's
less stressful.
Less stressful. It's somewhat freer. enabling. So, yeah, it's kind of hard for me to talk about. This is kind of just more like who I am, right? And I don't know. It's hard to articulate, I guess.
And do you think that people that particularly in the area of work, people who, I know about you is you're very interested in growing people and developing them and having them get wiser and more experienced. Do you
Sure.
feel like you're the fruit of become like a child in business is being cultivated in the lives of others in that space?
Yeah, I see others incorporating, I'm going to say similar approaches. And I think probably in the work world, it's a lot of it is bringing in fun, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making sure that you are, recognizing the successes that people are having, as opposed to just, again, and this is a struggle I've had over the years is like, check the box and say, okay, what's the next thing we got to get to? Right. More living, being in the moment. You'd watch kids play, right? There's nothing else, right? It's just right now. Here it is.
They're focused.
They're focused in the moment. Sure.
Not distracted. That makes me think about something that I was told, and I think it's worth repeating a couple times on the podcast, is that someone once told me out of the commands of Christ, in their list was 50, mine's 55, doesn't matter, but that half of them are non-religious. And that Jesus says to disciple nations, teaching them all I've commanded. And I think you're proof that you don't need to be, you can disciple pre-Christians, not that everyone you've worked with was not a Christian, but you can disciple pre-Christians just like you can disciple Christians, in that you are teaching them a way of Jesus to become like a child in the way they lead.
Sure.
Yeah. And you're giving us hard evidence, like this has happened in my role as a CEO.
Yeah. And maybe it's somewhat evidence in this podcast. I don't view myself as a word guy, right? I'm more of, gonna lead by example. And, when it comes to, discipling, I'm not gonna go out, and I'm more of a light guy, right? I'm really the light as opposed to scripture and whatnot in terms. So I'm really trying to let Jesus be in me and shine through me.
Well, and let's test that out by me asking you, of course, when we do that, it's attractive, it's kingdom attractive, and it is magnetic for crossing the line, as we would say, officially becoming a believer. You would say are an attractive leader, like people are attracted to your leadership because you're living this way.
I would say yes.
They like that style. Like, it's almost like if I was working with you, the thought I'd have is like, oh man, I want to respond that way. Like, I want to think that way. Ron seems free and also pleasant.
How about that? Yeah. Yeah. And it has led to, many opportunities to say, people have asked, the why, what's behind you. Right. And yeah, it's an opportunity to say it's Jesus.
Wow. And I think in this process, instead of saying I'm a Christian, a better response in terms of just where we're at as a culture, because who knows what Christian means anymore. Right. It's so many different definitions is, well, one of the things that I'm following Jesus in is I want to be like a child. And in business, I'm trying to find my way as to what that would look like. And it's almost like you're telling people about, hey, I'm following Jesus, but here's my intention in doing that.
Yeah.
Is to live like him.
Come on.
Okay, there's the next one, last one. You practice humility, putting others before yourself.
Absolutely.
Sounds childlike.
Oh yeah.
So cool.
I think I put it, we all aren't as important as we think we are.
There you go. Even better. Yeah. So that feeling of importance and I think we get that because we want to be influential. We want to make a difference. And then that can hijack our attitude about who we are and not putting other people first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, that's pretty awesome. I'm just going to check out the, I think in our journal prompt, this morning, we're talking about asking Holy Spirit to teach you what being more like a child in God's kingdom would look like. I think that that's going to be pretty revealing. I love to hear what people are hearing. Everybody hears different, and then everyone hears specifically what the Father wants to tell them, but we learn so much from hearing that. So if you're on a Telegram channel or you're on Instagram and you want to post what you learned it means to be childlike in God's kingdom, that would be amazing. And Ron, thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate you. You know how much I love you, and can't wait to be with you next. But thank you so much. I think this was powerful. I think this was so powerful for people to understand what this would look like. And you changed my opinion. You changed my opinion from this is a hard one to actually understand practically to this is actually pretty easy when we think about it in the right way to actually put into play. So thank you for the conversation. I really appreciate it.
All right, man. Love you.
Okay. Love you too. If you believe in the 100X Life movement, please follow and invite a friend by sharing this podcast. The 100X Life movement can also be found on Instagram and Facebook, and also at 100xlife.com. The 100X Life podcast was produced by Jenna D of Jenna D Services with music by Ryan Ellis.
Was lost, but you found me here, and your fire burns inside. It will not disappear, because the Spirit of the Lord is upon me to bind up the brokenhearted and set the captives